So Last Kids on Earth, when you're writing that, does that start as a proposal, or do you sit down and write, I'm going to write the thing that I most want in the world, or how does that come about?
It was sort of, I want to write the thing that I most want in the world. It was, so it sort of ties back to the movie thing, which had kind of been the original kind of driving force behind me wanting to kind of make stories. Was wanting to make, like, basically make Star Wars. That's the thing that I love most. So I figured out that I like writing for kids, and then illustrated novels became popular. Like what we've sort of know now is like the sort of modern illustrated novel, like Wimpy Kid and Dork Diaries and Big Nate and things like that, where they're heavily illustrated, and the illustrations are really interwoven with the story to the point where you can't really remove one or the other and have it still work. I mean, they do audiobooks of Last Kids, they do audiobooks of, I think, all those series, but you know, the illustrations really telling either the punchline or moving the story forward, as opposed to, like, I'm trying to think of stuff that I read growing up as illustrated, where it was sort of like the illustration was more there to support the story, or even like Eerie Elementary, which I write, the illustration is there to kind of support the story, and also like it's a context clue thing for readers. But I really love the idea. This is like me spending, again, like a lot of time walking around bookstores seeing what was popular. I really loved the idea of, like, one of the initial big sort of thoughts that I had was, could you do something that was a little bit like Wimpy Kid, a little bit like Big Nate, but not about middle school life, like not about like the sort of drama and comedy of middle school, but about like big action adventure, like zombies, like a big zombie sort of thing with monsters and like Indiana Jones scope action stuff. And so when I first started writing Last Kids, it was like it had a diary format. Not a diary, it was like a sort of, it was Jack sort of broadcast. It was like, I think it was called like Dispatches from the Treehouse at the End of the World, was like one of the early titles that I was playing around with, and one of the early, first couple of days that I tried writing it. And he was sort of talking into almost like vlogging or something, talking into, like, just talking to the world, not knowing that anybody was listening, and it was sort of like, a transcript of what was going on. So I liked the idea of being able to tell this sort of big action story, adventure zombie story, and try and do it in a way where it could. I liked how cinematic those illustrated novels feel, and still feel, and so that's what I sort of was one of the first big ideas, was like, oh, could you do that format for adventure stuff? And then so it became a proposal. It became a proposal of, I don't know, maybe 50 pages or so, 40 pages, that I wrote and I rewrote a bunch of times. And then it became a proposal first.
Something I bumped into, because I originally, my zombie book started out, well, it was going to be middle grade. I was going to focus younger kids, and then I wanted the zombies to stay violent. I wouldn't do cartoonish zombies. They had to be really violent. And as soon as one did something inappropriate, I was like, well, let's just change. Let's up the age of my protagonist here. It's YA now. We're going to have violence. How do you manage to steer? And I know there's cartoonish violence, but how do you manage to steer clear of the inherent darkness of the apocalypse and keep things relatively light and fun because there is darkness. I mean,
it's
around the edges.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Because that's what I think I spend the most, at least for a while, spent the most time thinking about. So the first book, last one, it took me about 3 years to write the first Last Kids book, because I had a proposal that was pretty similar to what Last Kids ended up being, and then and sort of tying back to what I said before about how I really was focused on trying to write like for a living and sort of treat like a job, and if you're a carpenter, you don't get to pick what houses you're gonna build. I don't know, that's a bad analogy, but I had rent to pay, and around that when Last Kids I started working on that, I was just getting married, and just like sort of life felt like it was going too fast, and but I had stuff I had responsibilities that I hadn't had before. So I had there was an agent who I really wanted to be my agent, and he read Last Kids, which at the time the proposal was called The Treehouse at the End of the World, and it was very, very similar to, pretty similar to what the final product was. But he had the note that you sort of are talking about, that it's like it was too dark. Like, how do you write about like a true end of the world apocalypse thing? Not like, there's not going to be a magic fix to it. A bunch of the, everybody sort of turned into an actual zombie and not like, not some sort of like their eyes are swirly and they, no, like they want to eat the kids and turn them into zombies too, like the mailman, the neighbor. And then there's huge monsters who are trying to eat the kids or destroy the kids or eat you see them eat zombies. Like Jack sees his neighbor's head get chomped off, I think, at one point. So it's definitely serious in that sense. And so that was the big note that I got, was this agent who I wanted to represent the book series, represent me as an author, thought that the tone and the stakes didn't quite match like the voice of the sort of like sarcastic first person, kind of like funny sarcastic first person narrator Jack. And so I went back and I reworked it, and I changed a bunch of it to make it like a portal fantasy thing where they would go back and forth through this treehouse, and they would go through the treehouse and come back, and there was like a sort of like a magic door inside this treehouse that would lead to like an alternate reality, an alternate version of their hometown. I was watching a lot of what's it called back then? Let's say Psych, not Psych. What's like that sort of X-Filesy show with
no, that's probably too old.
It'll pop in my head. I'm drawing a blank. And my recall has really gotten awful with like, picturing the whole show. Fringe. And so they would the kids would travel back and forth to this like alternate reality version of their hometown, because that was another thing that I wanted to, it was like one of the kind of like big sort of like, there's maybe like 5 or 6 kind of like big kind of like building blocks or like things that kind of came together to kind of to be the series. And there were things I wanted to do. And one was that it was big, like epic, like I said before, like sort of I pictured it as like Indiana Jones style, but like Marvel movie sized action sequences and stuff like that, but all taking place like in suburbs, and suburban locations. So like the places that I would imagine when I was a kid, like stuff happening, like the water park or the Home Depot or Target or whatever. And so that's the kids would go to this end of the world version of their hometown, get into adventures. There was like bad stuff going on over there. Like there was some sort of like evil spirit thing in charge. But it was like their gym teacher had been like transformed. It was very different. And so I spent about 2 years. I reworked the proposal, submitted it gave it to the agent like that, my agent like that he liked. That we sent around to a bunch of publishers, and Penguin liked it. And then when it came time to actually write it, and I talked about this on, I got to do a guest post for John Scalzi's blog, which is really cool. I talked about this sort of process in like a lot of detail, but then I had to actually write the full book of that version, and I hated it. Like I was miserable because I wanted to write like a real end of the world book, not like a there's a door to the end of the world book. And so after like, I don't know, 18 months or so of trying to make that, I got a finished manuscript out of it, but I didn't like it at all. And so then I called my editor like almost in tears basically one night, or I talked to my wife about it like in tears one night. I called my editor the next day. I was like, I know that the book's like 6 months late at this point or whatever it was, but can I go back and write this book that you guys didn't really buy? But I had wanted to I wanted to write the whole time, and I did, and that became what Last Kids is. But the notes that they had given me along the way, along these many different, many really not very good and really not fun. Like the fun wasn't there as a writer, so it wasn't coming through as fun for the reader. These many different bad drafts that the tone, I found a tone that kind of bridged the two, so it did work for the end of the world thing. And a very long answer to that question, but that is like the first 3 years of the series were all about that question of like how to do that, how to balance those two things. I think a lot of it is Jack's sort of narrative voice, his first person sort of whatever that phrase is, and that he's a little bit he's funny, sarcastic, he's really gung-ho positive about stuff. He really just kind of tackles things with let's go get it, and that is sort of how it I kind of try to smooth over the bumps between this is a world where these kids don't know what happened to their parents, their neighbors are getting eaten, but also they're going to have so much fun because they get to the candy store and eat anything they want. They can go to the video game store, come home with all the video games they want, and no one's going to yell at them for chewing gum and throwing out the treehouse window in the backyard. So that's sort of how
And they occasionally get to fight monsters and zombies, and who doesn't want to do that?
Exactly. And they get to do like it's like they're just living in the daydreaming. They're living out like the daydreams that I had when I was a kid with me and my friends, like what I wanted to do. It's the big epic stuff. Be like a cool hero.